And we're live. Welcome to our AMA, Cloud Attach versus Cloud Only, the debate. I'm your host, Steve Thomas, co-host with Danny Guillory of Unpacking Endpoint Management. Also today here in my persona as the wrecker from North Texas, here to settle the debate once and for all. What should new customers, new to endpoint management, adopt first? Should they go for cloud only, make the leap to cloud only, or should they consider co-management, cloud attach, and Intune and config manager? We're going to talk about it. We're going to hash it out, and we certainly want your participation today as well. And with me, I have a slew of awesome panelists and pundits, starting with Rochelle Blanchard. Rochelle Blanchard is also going to be moderating the Q&A and serving probably as referee for this bout here. With us as well is at Aria Updated on Twitter. You know her very well from all those awesome videos on Windows Update and Wolf B. Aria Carly. Welcome, Aria. And then we have Santos Martinez, the Config Ninja on Twitter, at Config Ninja, a member of the customer experience team for Intune, and my old job as well, if I'm not mistaken. And then finally, we have Johannes, one of our outstanding MVPs here to round out the panel. And like I said, we've got a lot of great stuff happening. We're all available on Twitter. And of course, please don't hesitate to leverage the Q&A. Notice the Q&A is only available in the tech community chat, not on YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you go over to the tech community page if you want to post your questions there. And what I'll do right now is I will kick it off. So if you are a new customer and you are looking at Microsoft's Endpoint Manager solutions for the very first time, should you go with cloud only with Intune for your manageability, or should you consider cloud attach, leveraging both Config Manager and Intune, or in some cases, just Config Manager only? Santos, what do you have to say?
I mean, if a customer asks me today, what will they implement, I will guide them straight to Microsoft Intune. The idea of that is because it will be very simple, very straightforward to adopt the entire cloud management scenario, right? If you're a total new customer, you don't have a single device that is being managed today by Config Manager or Intune, I will choose Intune straightforward, right? I will just enroll the device and start managing and administering that device directly in Intune. That's what I will recommend to a new customer today.
Same, absolutely the same. It's significant. It's going to take a lot less time and a lot less effort.
Trying to get these gloves off. My hands are getting sweaty here.
Oh, the gloves are off?
Gloves are off. Yeah.
But it's scared now because it's all going to be a hand-in-hand combat going forward. I like that.
We do have a question from the audience, Steve.
Uh-oh.
If you want to dive in.
Let's dive in.
From David, has there been any talk of how to smoothly move a device from Config Manager co-managed, Config Manager agent connected to Intune and all workloads shifted, to cloud managed without the agent? We don't have any remaining need for the Config Manager agent on most of our legacy devices, so the agent being there seems to be an extra point of failure on our hybrid devices. Who wants to take this one?
That's a very good question. I don't know where to start. I will give you my advice at that point. I'll potentially just send a deployment through Intune to remove the configuration manager agent, but more importantly, clean it up the entire agent from the device so there's not any leftover files or services related to configuration manager. That will basically make that device Intune manage only at that point when the config manager client is completely removed. But you're in a unique position as well. So because you stated you really don't have any needs right now for configuration manager agent to be present. Extra point of failure, I'm not sure I agree totally with that, but I'll let the rest debate on that one. But yeah, of course, I will just send a deployment through Intune, and I will just remove the configuration manager agent entirely using Intune at that point. I don't know what everybody else think about that.
Well, there's a lot to unpack with that question.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I said
see what I did
very
there?
interesting too, because he's in a very unique position that I don't know everybody is in. But if you're in that position, that's what I will do. Let's see what everybody else thinks.
I agree with Santos on this, that the agent itself, if you've moved all the workloads over, it doesn't really do a whole lot that is of any risk to you as such. So you can remove it at your own leisure. It does, like, yeah, you can just kick it off.
Resolved. Once all the workloads have shifted over to Intune,
Wait.
config manager.
There you go, Aria.
I would say totally good for you. I'm proud of you. You got all of your stuff to the cloud. You nailed it. 2, make sure you've deleted all remaining group policy reg keys on the device. Like, make sure you wipe them clean and there's none on it. The biggest risk of keeping the config man agent is it setting registry keys on the device that interfere with your hybrid state. And we have seen that happen. So I do hear you on some level of risk. I agree with you guys. It's low, but like there is some risk. And then 3, yeah, they're right. Just delete it with Intune, send a deployment. But remember to delete all latent reg keys because you don't need them anymore.
Very good point.
So as usual, Aria's right. I had a feeling that would happen, but hey, all right. So why would a new customer consider using Cloud Attach, being totally new and green to Endpoint Manager? Can you think of any reason why a customer would want to go through the trouble of having to set up a config manager infrastructure? Now, I mean, a lot of people, they've been working with config manager infrastructures for so long that they've been running, they've been upgrading smoothly. If you ask them when the last time they actually stood up a config manager infrastructure for the first time, they're going to tell you years. I mean, I had to do it the other day just to set up a lab, and also because I just wanted to go through the process step by step, and rather than do the fast methods. We have, Santos, we have labs here that we script and we provision, but I just wanted to, for the very first time, go through and set up step by step an entire config manager site hierarchy for the first time. And I got to tell you, it's a lot of work, and I had to really dive. I'm sitting there looking at my archives and my old folders and next to my Y2K readiness stuff, and it's been a while. It's been a long time. So I'll ask you again, why would, for a new customer to Endpoint Management, why would they want to go through all the trouble of standing up an on-premises infrastructure?
Well, Steve, since I'm here representing Danny, who couldn't be with us, I'm going to put on my Cloud Attached hat and tell you there are quite a few reasons why people might do that. Now, I'm all for you moving fully to the cloud, but I understand that different customers are coming from different environments. Now, you have some customers who maybe have zero infrastructure set up, but most customers, it's unlikely that they have lots of devices that have never been managed. It's more likely they've been managing with some other solution or maybe multiple other solutions. And some of those solutions might have been on-premises solutions. Those solutions may have given them certain capabilities, like having certain windows very, very tight that they're doing it for, or they have a wide variety of things in their organization, like let's say a factory that has some very like CNC mill machines, as well as have one-to-one client PCs. In those scenarios, they might be moving from their existing management solution to Microsoft's endpoint management solutions. In that case, they'll need to continue having the on-premise control over certain of their devices, and maybe feel more comfortable having that client already set up on all of their devices, and therefore would prefer a cloud attached or a co-managed environment rather than moving fully to the cloud. And that's partially just because the cloud is amazing and we have solutions for lots of stuff. But let's be honest, we're not all the way there yet. There are certain things that are easier to manage on premises or have more controls on-prem today.
Like what?
Are you going to make me say it? Are we going there?
Hey, we're for real here.
Servers,
Yeah,
third-party apps. Oops, my bad. Others can correct me, though. We may have had those completely solved.
Well, I'm a big fan of partners, too. And we have lots of partners out there. I'm not going to mention any specific ones because we love them all equally. But don't forget, we also have a lot of cloud ISV partners out there that can help complete the story as well. Okay.
So we have a lot of questions coming in right now.
Good, because I can't see with these glasses anymore. Okay. Sorry. All right.
So we've got a longer one from Paul, and I will try and do it justice. So we have established that 80% of users can use pure AAD/Intune managed devices. And if you can do that, it's much easier to manage. Hybrid anything introduces complexity. The trouble is we still have 20% that need to be AD joined. So we still have to worry about deploying devices joined to AD, GPO settings clashing with MDM settings, devices reverting to config manager management. Continued. And because hybrid AD join is so unreliable, we have to remove devices from autopilot if we want to AD join them. Advice on how to progress.
Well, that's a can of worms.
Very interesting.
Let's open it.
Deep question, Paul.
I would start by getting rid of your. If those devices are AD joined, but they can be Intune managed, I would get rid of your group policies. I'd put that as a priority and try to get them all managed by Intune as much as you can, even though they are still AD joined. Now, I think that would be a good first step.
I agree with you, Johannes, on that. I think understanding group policies is a very important step, right? Getting all those group policies imported into Intune, into group policy analytics, just to understand what kind of settings do we have that are still missing on Intune versus the one that you can actually just go for and move is a very, very important step, right? Because once we know what kind of group policies we're still missing, we can decide what do we need to get rid of, right? And I think that is a very important decision, just getting rid of the things that you no longer need because let's be honest, group policies been there for a long time, and some people may not have the time to review them. So it's a good opportunity to review them, right? And then get rid of the things that you don't need from the group policy perspective, and then create those as configuration profiles. I think will work.
I think we have an on-premises question coming in on my fax machine here.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I think sounds like I'm dialing into 1990 when I first
my fax machine's going off here, so I think we're going to have some commentary from the on-premises crowd. So.
To wrap it up, right? Other than dialing up, and I think that's a very good thing, right? If you think about what just happened, right, when we are dialing up into a system in the internet, it's like that's like reviewing group policies, right? We got to review them because it takes a long time to review, but at the end of time, we're going to have that fastest internet, right? Once we do those configuration profiles. So the very good question. I mean, identifying that 20% that is left, I think is a great journey to go through, right? And finally be fully cloud management. But take your time, right? There's a lot of things to review. Make sure that there's no conflict, as you mentioned. I think that is another hard thing to do, right? Understanding conflict, right? Understanding those settings that may be conflicting with new ones that you no longer need, right? So yeah, it's good question, Paul. I think those are the two things I can tell you is like spend the time in group policy, decide the settings that you want, and migrate them over. I think you'll be successful at doing that.
So to sum everything up here, let me just make sure I'm summing it up right. The best way to avoid MDM GPO conflicts is to not have an MDM GPO conflict.
Correct.
Right. Which means
very beginning.
Pick one or the other.
Yeah.
If at all possible.
Yeah, that's the way going forward. There is a policy you can set that basically says that Intune will always win.
That does not work for Windows Update policies. People need to stop
Yes.
spreading that
Yeah,
lie.
let's stick a
Never be
fork in
used.
that one. Yeah, that's. I mean,
It
But
works until it
from the
doesn't.
very beginning, I think is like Steve mentioned is the best thing to do, right? I mean, just don't migrate a policy that is not present inside Intune at that point. Well, very good question, Paul. What else do we have?
We do have a follow-up question for Aria, which is related to the reg keys that you mentioned before. From Tyler, is there a list ready or a script available to find and delete those keys?
Oh, great question. So I can only speak for the ones, I am sure we could put together a list of the ones ConfigMan is setting on the device. In terms of all of the ones that you have set over the years of setting group policy, I'm not sure. I'd have to see if either we or our partners have a script for that. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but I would bet we have the list of what ConfigMan sets somewhere.
It's not just the registry keys. There's also the local group policy that the config manager client set. So you need to get rid of that as well.
Yep.
There are scripts available somewhere. I don't have the link on me right now, but yeah, this is known.
I would Google it or Bing it, and you will be able to easily find the list.
Great.
Okay, we have another question. I'm going to start trying to crank through these. From Matthew, security.microsoft.com vulnerability recommendations sometimes only have group policy options as a fix. Since we're using Intune and Azure AD only and can't implement group policy, what other options do we have left? Can we request group policy fixes to be added to the settings templates in Intune for Windows machines?
Wow. I mean, I'll take that real quick, but I think that is a great feedback, great kind of like future request that we can take on and share with the team that is writing those, right? To see how can we potentially do those as configuration profiles and make those better, right? I mean, if they're missing from there in terms of recommendations and customers are in need to have that as configuration profile, we can probably do a better job at that and add those. I don't know what you think, Ari and Steve, but it's great feedback. I think we can take it back and see what we can do about it. Thanks, Matthew, for sharing that, because I think that's a new one for me, at least.
New to me too.
It should be noted, though, just a quick note, that even though a lot of the times these tools, but for example, security.microsoft.com, but there are others, they reference group policy. You might be able to find those exact same settings in the settings catalog and Intune. Even it's a different tool, but it's the same settings. They might even have the same. They probably have the same name and the same path within the tool.
Yeah, I'm struggling to understand why if the mitigation is a setting, why it would be a setting that's only available via group policy, unless it's something that is related to like domain controller location or something that is strictly on-prem, which could be the case as well.
I mean, if it's missing, then we got to find out why it's missing, right? So that would be my only take there is like, if it's missing, let's figure out why it's missing.
All right, let's get some more questions in.
So speaking of tools again, from Anthony, will there be any tool to help seamlessly convert hybrid AD join to Azure AD join only with minimum user disruption?
Oh, that's a good one. The ref takes a point away. Oh, I got nothing.
Very good, Anthony. Very good. But it's also a challenge. I don't know about what everybody else think about that, but it can be a challenge just saying, oh, I'm going to seamlessly upgrade or migrate that device from hybrid to Azure AD with a tool. I'll be a bit scared about it. I mean, you can definitely do some automations behind that to make it smoother, but I don't know about full end-to-end automation. I'll be a little bit more scared about that than anything, especially on a tool set. But that will be my opinion at that point. I don't know what everybody else thinks.
It's wishful thinking that even if you had such a tool that you would want to use it, you're better off just using the pre-existing features that Intune and Azure AD have to offer. For example, OneDrive, KFM, and enterprise state roaming. and because those can help you tremendously when you basically reset the device and let it Azure AD join. The user doesn't really care about the settings; they care about their data and their tools and their apps and tools. So don't overthink this problem too much.
Yeah.
They're really asking for state migration, is what
Yeah,
they're asking.
exactly. I was going to say that. Just for state, right? Like the user should just be able to log in and see everything as they did it last time, right? And that's all they care at that point.
So before Aria leaves, since she knocked me down in the first round, it wasn't a KO because I got back up. But, going back to your point, Aria, about customers who are already working on an on-premises management solution like a third party, they already have servers stood up and everything. You're right. That's one case. But what if I'm a startup company and I'm looking at the fact that I've got 60 or 70 desktops that I really don't have any control over, that my company is growing rapidly and I've got mobile devices and I really need to scale quickly. Which would be the better option, cloud only or cloud attach?
Well, I mean, Steve, if you're going to say one very specific use case for a customer who has no necessary needs to have high on management and hasn't trained their employees over decades to react a certain way, then sure, especially a startup where you've got more tech people who are going to be more cool. Heck, in that case, Steve, though, I've got a real question for you. Why are you even managing the devices? Why not just leverage our retail experiences, which actually are shown to be more effective at keeping devices up to date and secure?
Oh, retail experiences? Go on.
Right.
I would say that if you actually want to keep, at least from a Windows security perspective, devices up to date, if you get new Windows 11 devices for all of your startup folks, your 60 people, and don't put any policies on them, you'll actually find that they'll have a better experience, stay more up to date with their Windows updates, and be more secure. I'm just saying, you do you, but hot take.
Well, they'll need some glue, especially if they want to get in if they want to maintain control of their data estate as well, especially if they're a startup with intellectual property. They're going to, they want to get in front of any kind of legal problems. So they're going to want to have a lot of their estate, managed with controls that Intune may not directly control, but Intune can help facilitate, like onboarding them to Defender for Endpoint, onboarding to, Endpoint DLP with Microsoft Purview. So have to get a Purview plugin. Don't forget we have Purview out there.
I thought next you're going to go to Cloud PC and talk about, how they really are growing quickly. They shouldn't be tied down to a device.
Now we've already had those folks on the show. And we'll probably have them back again soon as well.
Steve, before we leave, can I do the next question?
Sure.
Actually, I should ask Rochelle. You're not in charge. Rochelle.
Oh, no, you can do it. Go for it.
You should ask the question. I just read ahead.
Go ahead, Aria.
Okay, so the next question is from James. And James, I am so happy that you asked this. It's a question that's it's asked all the time, and you even called that out. One pain point that you see is between group policy and Intune-Cloud Management is that there's no mechanism in Windows to choose or select a preference for which configuration management system to honor if there's a conflict. Can you speak to that? I may just be misinformed. As Johannes said, there is technically a policy that will allow some MDM policies to win over some group policies. It works specifically for security and some other things, but not everything. And there's a very good reason for that. It's not that we're just trying to make your life difficult by saying you can't just flip a key to have this policy win over that one. It's because of the nature of the way that group policy and CSPs evolved, and the fact that we don't actually have a one-to-one mapping of group policies and CSPs. In some cases, we totally do. There's an equivalent group policy for each CSP. But in many other cases, like Windows Update, we don't. In fact, many policies function quite differently. For example, Allow Auto Update is very different in terms of the update CSP than Configure Automatic Updates, the group policy version. One gives you the ability to notify to download, the other one's notify to install, and the other one doesn't actually react the same way. And so when the update stack looks at those two policies, it's functioning completely differently. Because of the fact that it's not a one-to-one mapping, if I was just going to say, hey, this policy overrides this policy, it gets a bit complicated. But it's even worse than that. Let's say I did have a one-to-one mapping. Well, that's great, except for the fact that you consider that our policies actually interact with one another. What do I mean? Well, if you configure policy A and you configure compliance deadline, for example, compliance deadline might actually override policy A, like the notification setting. So let's say I set in Intune the notification setting, but then I set group policy compliance deadline. Well, if you said MDM always wins over GP, you may have overwritten the notification setting for GP, but you didn't override the group policy for a compliance deadline. Do I then say, okay, no group policies applied because I have this set, or do I only override specific ones? And so then you can get to a bunch of different conflicting cases, and this leads to the policy not actually working. And this is a big part of why we say when you're moving to the cloud and you're moving some area over, even if it's just all Windows updates, wipe your group policy registry keys, make sure there's none set for local group policy, and go from there, because you really don't want to get in a situation that conflicts, because it's really hard for us to give you a good way to honor only one or the other. Hopefully that helps provide a little bit of insight and didn't just make things way more confusing, but fully understand the question there.
I'm glad you got to answer that, Arya.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, you've got a cloud orchestrator conflicting with a on-device orchestrator, and that's always just a tricky thing to do and to manage. And I can't really add anything to what Arya said.
That's perfect. I don't know.
Arya's knocking me out. Oh.
Don't worry, Steve. I'm leaving.
Danny brought a ringer in.
Arya just dropped the mic.
Drop the mic and walk out.
The amount of workload that will be put on you as the admin of having to deal with two management authorities that are basically doing the exact same thing. Like, what is the value in doing it twice, or having to operate two systems that are going to conflict anyway? Just move over. It's way better. Stick to one or the other, not both.
Okay, we've got a question from Zachary. Despite moving significant portions of our processes from ConfigMan to Intune, there are 2 points holding us back. Management of on-prem servers where internet access is not allowed, and device inventory reporting. Running CM pivot queries on a large group of devices, querying software/hardware inventory, etc. Suggestions for next steps to leverage Intune for similar functionality. How do we avoid maintaining Intune and Config Manager side by side without duplicating effort?
Oof. Santos, take this one. Come on.
Tough question. Well, all I can do is think about the question and give you my feedback, right? I think about separating managements, right? Server management, desktop management, and what we are calling here is more of a DMC type security scenario, right? So we're not really talking about one scenario that will fit all of them, right? We're talking about 3 different scenarios, right? Server management, desktop management, and a DMC or security style plays where security is key, right? Access is limited, access is restricted, and some people will only need access to that, right? So I think it's 3 different things, right? So thinking about one solution that will fit all, that will be cloud only, is a little bit of a challenge, right? Specifically on the server side and on the security side of the DMC, where I don't really want a lot of access to be in and out. So in theory, you're still going to have to manage 3 different types of scenarios, and it should also be 3 different types of teams, right? One that's strictly focused on the desktop management and end user experience, and what that focus on the server management, and of course one that focuses on security. So I think you have to separate all 3 of them, in my opinion. You can't really say, oh, I'm going to do all of this in one place. While we can try, it should definitely be 3 separate settings, 3 separate configurations, 3 separate management styles, because I really want to make sure that my secure environment is really, really secure, and my server management is up to date and optimal, because I will never basically restart those servers on specific scenarios where I will do that when we have change management controls and when we do those maintenance, right? And then the desktop is completely different, right? Because it's all about end user experience. And those can be tough for customers than the server management side. What are we going to do about that? I think that is the real question, right? And I think that is a very tough question to answer in today's session. But think about it as 3 different management all the time. I think one single place is a little bit challenging, right? As we evolve, as we go into cloud management scenarios, we got to think about them as different. We're listening, right? And we definitely hear you on that about, I would like to have a better management for the server side. And we are actually listening, and that's great feedback. And I'm pretty happy that you call it out, because we can sit down and get that feedback back to our management about it. But other than that, I mean, that's the best answer I can give you. I don't think we have anything right now that I can say, hey, go and do this today. But let's see what happens going forward.
So one thing I want to point out here, okay, we're talking about Endpoint Manager, and this is where the comparison of Intune and Config Manager get interesting, because Intune is meant as an endpoint manager solution. Config Manager is both an endpoint and a server management solution. So which begs the question, where should, if they want to they have the choice here. They can have their endpoints managed by the cloud while having their servers managed by the on-premises legacy infrastructure, or hear me out, they could start looking to transform their server and build this hybrid solution out. And that's the comparable component to that would be for them to take a look at some of our Azure-based solutions like Azure Arc and Windows Admin Center. And I'll get one of our producers to actually put that link in for you as well, if you're interested in finding out, learning more about Azure Arc.
Correct.
I never pass up an opportunity for a shameless plug.
Great question, Zachary. That is a very deep question for us to come back and think. And I think we are listening. We're definitely listening.
You got mail.
The other side of the story was about CM pivot, which I think is a really good question and feedback for us to come.
So somebody just on AOL confirmed that they prefer Config Manager for server.
There you go. There you go.
Okay. We just have to agree to disagree. All right.
Yeah. So what is the next question we got there, Rachel?
We've got a question from Phil. Since we're migrating GPOs to Intune configuration profiles, what is the recommended way to keep track of changes to those Intune configuration profiles? Basically looking for version control for config profiles.
Wow.
I don't think that exists in Intune.
Not a version control today, right?
So I would ask what are the actual, are there regulatory requirements? Why do they need version control specifically? Are they looking to create a solution? I mean, you want to peel back the onion for this type of question. You want to find out.
I have like 20 more questions to go back and ask.
Yeah.
Right?
It smells a little bit like AGPM was used, like Advanced Group Policy Management, or they were using a comparable tool that allowed them to, push out things, but then roll back if they realize that something went haywire.
I'm thinking more like Config Manager version tracking, right? So whenever you create a profile or a policy in Config Manager, there is a version, right? And I can always say, oh, actually this version failed. I'm going to revert it to that version. That's where my head is thinking when I see this type of question. Maybe they want something like that where they can probably revert to the previous version if something was wrong, right? Or that's the other side of the question we got to go find out. Or are you talking about when we do a change, how do I know about that change? And we do have a process where we update those policies. And how can you keep track of those updates will be more about what we document in our release cycles in what's new. But that's where we got to ask that question of what exactly is the ask here? Are we talking about version control where I can just revert back to that version? But post a follow-up answer there. Maybe we come back to this one later and we can answer it. So let's move on to the next one because that one we may need a follow-up.
Yeah, Phil, if you can add some context, we'll make sure and keep answering for you. I'm going to move on to Bryce. What workloads bring the most value and or are the lowest hanging fruit for us to look into on the co-management workload transition journey?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I will let you start that. Go for it.
Yeah. I would start with endpoint protection. It's the easiest one and the safest one to implement. Because when you start implementing it, the client is never left in an unmanaged state for your endpoint security policies. There is a handover. So what I mean is you have your policies for antivirus and that sort of thing in Config Manager, and then you move the workload. But that doesn't, the clients don't turn off those policies unless there's a corresponding Intune policy that will replace it. So it's a very safe and easy workload to move over. That's the one I would start with.
I can't think of any negative impact of that either.
Yeah.
When you talk about WFB, you could actually get some negative impact if you have bandwidth issues, but definitely not with endpoint protection. But Santos,
I have a different perspective, and I want to ask you both to think about this for a second. Why not apps?
Well, apps is not going to hurt anything, but the question is, if you haven't moved app management over, or if you don't have any apps coming from Intune, they're still going to get them from Config Manager.
And why not moving?
I mean, you could turn it on just to say you took the button.
Yeah.
So why not moving the app workload then? What is the risk then?
Well, there is no risk.
There's no risk. So
there's no
think
risk.
about it for a second, right? Because the question is about what is the lowest hanging fruit and what is the easiest probably to move, right? With lowest problems. So if I don't have an app in Intune and I decide to transition the app workload to Intune, do I lose anything or do I gain something at that point? Because I can make that a stopping point. I can say, going forward, I'm going to start deploying my application using Intune, my Win32 app, my LOB apps, everything that I need on Intune at that point. So I transition a workload. And after that day, I no longer create a package or an application in Config Manager. I just go to Intune and say, I'm going to deploy that app. Isn't that easier, faster, and better, in my opinion? I don't know. What do you guys think? It's for debate. That's why I'm asking you guys. Because you guys provide one that is, I think, is pretty good, the endpoint protection. But not everybody, let's make this clear. Not everybody is using those policies today. So not every customer will be using that. So which one I think is easier, in my opinion, is apps, because there's no risk in doing that. Is it?
No,
fair enough.
Right. Yeah.
So that's two workloads we can move over.
Because I think it's a really good answer. And I agreed, right? In terms of endpoint protection and policies, those are really good. That will follow up with compliance, in my opinion, because it doesn't provide that much of a risk at that point. But if you ask me which workload I will start, I will say I will start with apps. I will definitely start with applications. There's no risk. At that point, I start telling everybody, please create Win32 apps and deploy via Intune, because that's what I need. I no longer need a distribution point dependency. I can just download everything to the cloud. So I think if you ask me, I will say start with apps. There you go. That was a good conversation. I don't know.
I like that. Santos is trying to get a little feisty with his questions. I'm digging
Those
it.
are my ninja skills. I start I'm going to throw a couple fights here.
All right, we have another question coming in from Danny, and I apologize if I butchered your name, but I'm trying my best with the names. We also kept notes in GPO discussion, the date of the change and why or who approved. Also, we would export our GPO before a larger GPO change, and then for restoral, we would back them up each quarter. What are recommended methods for restoral with CSPs and other configurations?
There is a third-party tool you can use for this purpose. It's on GitHub. It's called Intune Management, one word, by a guy called Mike K. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Using that, you can export and import policies. Basically, almost your entire tenant, really.
Yeah, don't forget that Intune is everything you see in Intune is just an interface to this massive management graph API.
Yeah.
And everything in that graph API, all the assets can actually, be exported. The Intune product team, Dave Falkus and gang, have put a ton of scripts up on GitHub as well for a variety of things. You also have on GitHub, DSC solutions for tenants as well, because we have customers who want to be able to import and export whole cloth tenants for, let's say, I have a dev tenant, and then I have a QA tenant, and then I have a production tenant, and they want to be able to shift stuff back and forth. And that's, I would advise doing what some of our really large commercial customers have done, and where they maintain like a smaller, maybe 10, 20 licensed, dev tenant and QA tenant for, doing the initial testing. And once they've validated that, then they can actually, export and import that into the production tenant.
That's correct. We have talked about this a couple of times, where we built some tools using Graph to export every single setting from one tenant and move it into another one. As you mentioned, a good description of having a pre-prod and then a production, or a development and then a production. Using Graph, you can easily transition those settings over the same way they are. And we have put a couple examples in the GitHub scripts about that, and that will be very helpful and beneficial for those that want it. So definitely a great approach. You always should test that on development, figure out if that works, is that satisfy your need, and then release the production. So you can take that approach of, this setting is ready, let me go ahead and export it using Graph.
Okay, we have a question from Paul. On-prem, whole set of design considerations, number of GPOs versus number of policies, could force loop back user to machine, etc. Wait for network on logon. In cloud, what design considerations exist? There's a few questions here, so I'm going to put them all out, and then you guys can tackle.
Laundry list here.
What tools would you use to track any performance impact of a cloud policy for education customers? First, log on performance and user experience is certainly important. Any tips of what has worked well for anyone on this call?
Go for it, Steve.
Well, I'll just share a wonderful story of my own personal experience here at Microsoft. When I got my Surface book and realized that my logons were taking sometimes 5 to 6 minutes to log on, because Microsoft at the time was still adopting group policy, and I'd have to go through and process 10, 12 device policies, and then of course 5 or 6 user policies. And I'll never forget the joy of when I replace that device with the new one, and just Azure AD join to the Microsoft tenant, and just bam, 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 lickety split. It was one of the reasons why the cloud is going to be beneficial to adopt, is because all of the trying to create a well-architected framework on premises to maximize and optimize your endpoint device experience, whether they're getting and processing policies, whether they're logging on, logging off in decent intervals. The wonderful thing about these cloud joined devices is all of this stuff happens at a uniform sync time, and not once, twice, 3 stacked on top of each other. All the policy computation is done on the back end, and all of the well-architected stuff is left up to the vendor, in this case Microsoft, to actually go up and ensure. And we are constantly expanding, scaling out, and improving our infrastructure on the back end on a daily and weekly basis to continue to bring improvement to our customers as our customer base and our number of devices expand. We have, what is it, 150 million devices managed by the Microsoft Cloud in Intune? Something like that, Santos?
That's correct, yeah.
I lose track. It's growing so much, and all of them don't have to worry about, where am I going to place the site server, and how to make sure my SQL servers are tuned right, and make sure everything is adequately licensed on the back end, because Their M365 E3 or E5 license takes care of everything, and all they have to do is onboard that device. Once that device is onboarded, the cloud takes care of everything.
I think it's about simplification, right, Steve?
Yeah.
Like at that point, when we think about logon experiences, especially on education, right, it's all about simplification, making sure that we only put the things that matters for that login experience to be good, and anything else should follow, right? It shouldn't be part of the login experience. It should be something that is more of a maintenance task or something that is when the user is active rather than on the logon. And I think that behavior has changed over time, right? Where we initially wanted everything to be at log on, and over time we have to think about that approach and say, no, actually there's very little things that I need to log on. Security, I want to make sure that this is operational, and then every maintenance task like configurations, everything will follow after the log on, which I think is about simplification at that point, in my opinion.
I got a question from 7245.3456 at CompuServe.com. Will Intune support @v applications? No.
Yes, no, no, it won't. I think, like you said, it's a straight no for now. There are more questions here from the audience too, before we wrap it up in the next few minutes.
Yeah, from Jason, how would you recommend moving machines from one Intune environment to another?
Yeah, enroll them into autopilot in the new tenant and then reset the devices. This is the most reliable way of doing it.
Very good answer, Johannes. I think that's the simple you can do, right?
Yeah.
Remove the hash from one, put it on the other, set of that device, and let it enroll again through Windows Autopilot. I think you nailed it. I think that is as simple as it can get, right? Because when the user log in again, we'll be on the other Intune tenant with everything they need.
Now, Johannes, you're basing that off of the assumption that, and the reason I want to stress this is that we are holistically adopting Microsoft 365. There's a symbiotic relationship between 1.5K, known folder redirection. You mentioned earlier state roaming. All of that. That's assuming all of that stuff's in place. And I want to drive home the fact that it is a symbiotic relationship. And if you're approaching this where you're looking to have 8 different vendors, and you're going to pick one solution from column A, one solution from column B, one solution from column C, and you create this a la carte hodgepodge of solutions. It's not going to play nice with each other. You wind up having 8 agents on the machine, each doing a tiny little part, and you want to talk about performance impact at that point.
Then at that point, if you have all those things in this case of the moving from one tenant to another is about unenrollment and re-enrollment. Just remove the enrollment from one and enroll into the other tenant. It will be as simple as it can get at that point. But of course, there's so many dependencies that we got to think about. So, great question, Jason.
So before we close out, I want to know, first of all, I was expecting a much bloodier fight here for this debate. But does anyone have any hot takes or tips that you want to throw out before we close out here? Because I don't know if we resolved this debate yet.
I think we still have a lot to think about, right? There's so many questions out there that we haven't answered. Plus, we don't know who wins this round.
It was unfair to replace Danny with Aria at the last minute. Unfair.
Anything else? I don't know. I led you out with this thought I had when we were thinking about cloud only versus scenarios that are inside the environment. Be open-minded, right? It's all about learning, constant seeking that perfection, right? When I think about cloud, I think about me every single day researching and expanding my mind. So try to be open to new things that you want to learn, that you want to implement, that are new. And while new is sometimes scary, we shouldn't be afraid of that journey of learning, right? Because at the end of time, once we finish that journey of learning, we will look back and say, I know this was scary, but it was great learning experience, and we're ready for the next 10, 20 years. So my only take about cloud is don't be afraid of it. I know you're going to be learning every day. I know you're going to be reading every day. Sometimes it's going to be bad, fail it, and you're going to be super upset with us about that. But be open to that. Be open to that learning experience. Be open to fail, but be open that at the end of that journey, you're going to be really, really successful, and you're going to be ready for the next 10, 20 years to be on that journey. So I think that's the only thing I'm going to leave out when you think about the cloud-only scenarios.
And with that, we're coming up to the end of our program. I want to remind everyone that we're going to continue to answer questions in the chat on Tech Community for the rest of the hour. And we'll also monitor and follow up throughout the rest of Technical Takeoff Week as well. Thank you for being with us and helping us kick this off. And next up is going to be, well, Aria's back again, fresh off of her KO of me. She'll be back with when is my device going to update? Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.